Hello and welcome to Coffee Charged Conversations here at Real Global Productions. Today, this is our first sponsored episode, which is a big moment for Coffee Charged Conversations. And that is why today we are joined by my ex-school principal and the CEO of Centennial Schools, Mr. Shaun Fuchs. Shaun, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me on the show.
And you did your first ice bath today. And yeah, you actually are the current record holder. I know that you are very strong-willed and very competitive. How did you find the ice bath experience today?
I'm glad you went first so that I could see. Yeah, it was fine. It felt a bit freaky getting into a deep freeze. Too many horror movies that I've seen with consequences of bodies in deep freezers, but it was good. And I think during the process, I suppose the history teacher in me came out and I was, what's happening? What if I was on the Titanic and I was in the water? How long would I survive? So those were my thoughts. But it was really good and fresh. And I mean, I'm still feeling quite perky now. So yeah, it was good.
Well, I think you handled it perfectly. As I've said before, I think the first 2 minutes are usually the worst, and after that, I mean, we were talking normally.
Yeah, I felt guilty because when I was chatting, I was like, should I be concentrating? Should it be mind over matter? I was like, no, just have a conversation. So it was fine.
Yeah, and I think the rest of the guests are going to struggle. 9 minutes and 4 seconds is quite a record. So yeah, well done to you. And yeah, while I was away in America, I had the privilege to read your book, Fush, a story of pride, respect, and leadership. And last week, I got to experience Centennial Schools. You welcomed me to the school and showed me around and signed the book. And that's always going to be something that I remember for the rest of my life, as well as this episode. And according to your book, you have been a son, a husband, a brother, an uncle, and a father figure, as well as a prefect, a head boy, a rugby player, a power lifter, a water polo coach, a photographer, a DJ, a soldier, a history teacher, a deputy principal, a principal, and a CEO of a school. But who are you today?
Today I'm just Fush. I think today, the most important thing about, I think, human beings is just to be your authentic self. You have so many characters and so many characteristics that contribute to who you are as a person, but the authentic person is really the true you, and those all make up certain chapters of my life. But yeah, I'm just Fush.
And where did Fush come from? I mean, I was always in school. I used to call you Mr. Fuchs or Sir, and you said, "Call me Fush." Where did that actually come from?
It came from the nickname came from water polo coaching. So in water polo, it's almost tradition that so many of the players in that end up with nicknames, and so the combination of Fuchs and I suppose Shaun. So if you take the FU and the SH, it ended up being Fush. So, and that's what my water polo players called me in the early parts of my career. So they very seldomly called me Sir or Mr. Fuchs. They would call me Fush, and that stuck. So it made sense when I wrote the book to actually just call it Fush.
Okay. And you have been in education for a long time. What inspired you to get into the education sector in the first place?
34 years to be exact, but I
Wow.
think as a teacher I was always a teacher. You don't need a degree to be a teacher. You don't need a qualification. It's inherent in who you are as a person. And my mom will say quite openly that as a little kid in nursery school, I would gather the kids up and I would have a stick which I wouldn't beat them with. I would point it to the board and I would teach and I would kind of get everyone together and do that. So I think I've always been a teacher. I'd always wanted to be a teacher. And so it was just the most natural thing for me. And, I always go back to that final assembly in 2015 when I stood down as head of Crawford Lonehill. And I'd spent a lot of time because I was now leaving formal education and going into the corporate space of education. And I remember spending a lot of time reflecting on my farewell speech. What am I going to say? This has been a huge part of my career. And why did I become a teacher? And I suppose you became a teacher because you want to make a difference in people's lives. You want to change. You want to be a positive influence. You want to change lives for the better. So I think that's always been who I am as a person. And being a teacher was the most natural thing. I had an interview with the Financial Mail about 2 weeks ago. And one of the questions the journalist asked was, what is something that people don't know about you? And I said, I suppose I had visions of being a lawyer as well. So sort of the latter part of my school career. Thank goodness I never became a lawyer. I think I would have been a terrible lawyer, and a much better teacher. So fortunately, I ended up in teaching.
And what inspired you then to start Centennial Schools?
Centennial Schools had to start, and the simplest reason is education has not changed. So it doesn't matter what school you're in today, and I'm talking globally. I'm not just talking in South Africa. Education has not changed to the point that you have the teaching methodology known as the pedagogy. The teaching methodology is the same. Teacher in the front, teacher drives the lesson, gives the work, provides the content, and students receive it, do their work, do the worksheets, etc., and get assessed on it. And the system is flawed. Why? Because the current education system was designed on the first industrial revolution. The first industrial revolution is 300 years ago. We're now on the fifth industrial revolution with artificial intelligence as the dominant factor in the fifth industrial revolution, yet we're still teaching to the first industrial revolution characteristics. So education has not changed. If you look at, again, a history teacher, right? So take 1939, September, just before the outbreak or just at the outbreak of World War II. Take 1945, September. Could you go back to 1939? Never. The world had changed. Geography, politics, history, finance, business, everything had changed in the world. We had the same thing in our lives now, where we had it in January of 2020 and January 2022. The whole world changed. How we socialize, how we interact, how we do business. So much changed. But what did schools do? Schools had the perfect opportunity, education had the perfect opportunity to change. But all they did is when January 2022 arrived, they went straight back to what they were doing in January 2020. They didn't change. So for me, one, I always knew I'd have my own school. That was ultimately where I was. I've been an entrepreneur since I was a little kid. You remember in the book I spoke about selling we lived in a plot in Pelindaba, where Kaya Sands is now, in the 70s. And as an 8-year-old, I used to take tomatoes that we grew in tunnels and sell them on the side of the road and make some money. So as an entrepreneur and as a teacher, I would start my own school. And the timing was right because Centennial Schools was created to be the most relevant school for the second quarter of the 21st century. And how we teach is different. How we take technology and we use it to accelerate learning. How we use it as the most relevant form of as an educational tool. So, and schools haven't done that. It's in our DNA. Whereas in schools you have pockets of those things. Where you have a teacher that's really driven by technology and gets it, But the rest of the DNA of that school is based on 20th century education.
Flip files and on
Exactly.
paper. Yeah.
Exactly. And the simple question I ask parents is, when's the last time you took a piece of paper, punched it, opened a lever arch file, put file dividers in, and then put the piece of paper in? They laugh at me. I said, fine, but your best schools globally, and certainly in this country, that's how they're teaching. That's exactly how they're teaching. So our education system has not evolved. And even worse, we have one exam at the end of 12 years that defines your entire education. That is as flawed a system as you could have.
Yeah.
Completely flawed. Because again, measure it. How do we measure it? Write those exams in November. Write the exact same exams on the 19th of January when you get your matric results. And what do you think the result is going to be?
A lot worse. Yeah. I mean, that's how I felt as well. Also, early years of varsity, I felt it was a lot of parrot fashion learning, and you didn't really get the practical side. For me, it was quite a wide awakening when I came to Centennial Schools and realized how schools could be. I think, the digital space hasn't really been utilized before in many schools, especially within South Africa. And from my side, I think it's absolutely awesome what Centennial Schools is doing.
Thank you.
And according to your website, 70% of students reported better grades, better attendance, or improved creativity in newly designed active learning environments. Why would you say that is?
So go back to most schools. Most schools are set up on that Industrial Revolution model from the 18th century, 18th and 19th century. So square space, desks in a row, unless the teacher moves it into groups, and you're sitting facing one direction for 8 hours a day. And most people cannot function like that. So I said earlier, for me, I'm not so much an auditory learner. I'm more visual and kinetic. So after 30 seconds, I'm looking for squirrels because I just cannot sit still and concentrate. So in a space in the learning hub in Centennial Schools, which is the traditional classroom, space is bigger. We've used color to really provide stimulation. We've looked at mobile desks, or Moby chairs as we call them, which move into a space that the particular lesson is designed around. So I might walk in and say, okay, guys, we're going to be doing a collaborative lesson today. I want you to get into groups of 3 or 4. And within seconds, the students can move their desks, which are mobile, into groups of 3 or 4. Now they're facing each other. There's a whole lot of skills that are going to come into that, right? And as soon as they finish, they can then go back into a lecture style or back into a large circle where we can then share things and see each other. We have high desk where students can stand. We know the science tells us that standing, one, you're more attentive, you're more creative. It's actually good for your health, standing. And so we find particularly boys like that. They like to stand, and they are more engaged in the lesson. So not only are you changing how we teach by using technology and the pedagogy changing, but you have to change the physical space. And that's exactly what we've done. That physical space has changed.
I mean, for me, I'm someone, as I've told you before, I like to walk around. That really gets my brain flowing. And when I was in class, the only time I'd really walk is from class to class. But sitting down, I'd get distracted very, very easily. And I think there's a lot of components at Centennial Schools that would really appeal to me. And I really do mean that in an honest sense. I think you mentioned AI a little bit earlier, and AI can be a little bit of a touchy subject for some people. I think there's a lot of fear and doubt in terms of AI. What do you think the future looks like with AI? Do you think it's something that we need to be fearful of?
I think Hollywood has clouded our judgment with many things, and this is probably one of them. I think there is a reality in how much artificial intelligence is going to play in the future. Um, but I do think that we have survived many things. And I remember when in education, when the calculator was made a compulsory tool for mathematics. And most maths teachers completely collapsed because your brain's not going to work and you're not going to be able to think for yourself. And well, try and do maths today without a calculator. It's virtually impossible. So we've evolved around that. And I think AI is one of those things that we're going to evolve around. The interesting thing is going to be, how do we acknowledge the change and how do we understand what's happening? Because if you go right now, in the last few days, AI is on your phone automatically. If you have any Meta product, it's there. So if I'm on WhatsApp, suddenly this thing popped up, AI, is like, what the hell is this? So I had a look, I typed in some things. Oh, this is great. So using it as a tool is incredible. Tomorrow I've got a little esports junior team flying to Dubai to compete in the Dubai Esports Festival for Minecraft. And I thought, okay, let me test AI. So I tested a couple of questions. I looked at exchange rate. How much is this? How do I check in on Emirates? I knew how to check in, but I wanted to see what AI does. Gave me the links, told me what to do. Can you give me some more information? So as a tool, it's incredibly powerful, and we need to use it in the right way. In teaching, it's insane what you can do and how effective it can be. The tragedy is if you're just going to use it because you're lazy. And I see that. I see that with even teachers applying and sending CVs or letters through that's been written by AI. You can pick it up immediately, ChatGPT, the style, the tone, the use of language. Sometimes people forget to tell AI to use British grammar because that's what we do in South Africa. It's what our language is based on. And you have these American words coming through. And you can see immediately that it's AI. So again, it's how we use it as a tool.
And how do you look after the mental health of your students at Centennial Schools? Because with a lot of technology and the advancements in AI, I think it's easy to get distracted in today's world, and we become so glued to our smartphones or our devices. How do you look after one's mental health and prioritize life outside of the screen?
There's this dichotomy that we faced with, and what I mean by that, we can't live without it, and we shouldn't always live with it. So if you, for example, and you had that experience when you traveled, your phone shut down, and that was it. You went into complete panic mode. I would go into panic mode. My entire life is on that device, from my banking to my emails to photographs to your entire life is on that device. But again, you have to, like with everything, you have to have a balance. So what I discovered when I was putting the model together and the research, which was during lockdown in 2020 and 2021, the levels of anxiety in students today are through the roof, way more than my 34 years of education that I'd experienced. And so for me, what was important was, how do we design a school that proactively manages mental wellness? And so we designed physical wellness into the curriculum. So students in their timetable they do CrossFit classes. It's not brand, it's CrossFit's trademark, but CrossFit style classes, fitness with qualified instructors, focus on core strength, and you bring that in as part of the curriculum. Not the old phys ed where there's a ball, go and kick and play and we'll see you later. No, This is constructed fitness classes for the students. And then healthy body, healthy mind. Combined with that, we have an app which our students check in with every day. The app's called It's Okay. And that means every single morning when class starts, the teacher does registration and then gives the students about 2 minutes to check in. And they check in. How are you feeling today? Good, bad, sad, angry, frustrated, anxious, whatever. And then why? Good night's sleep, fight with sibling, broke up with girlfriend, dog died, whatever. You track that. It puts it in. So it asks those questions. And then it gives advice on breathing exercises or how to calm down. And it gives the students advice. That goes into a central database. The grade head, round about 10 o'clock, looks at it, the collated information on the database and goes, whoa, grade 7 girls, spike in anxiety. What's happening? Proactively go and investigate. Students who are committing self-harm, reach out. Students who are just feeling overwhelmed. So it doesn't always work, but at least you've got some systems in place that proactively are looking to address mental wellness. And the same, we have a chill zone. So chill zone is a quiet space, big, comfy bean bags. Students can lie on them, relax, just listen to music, calm down, focus on breathing. We offer yoga as an activity at school that helps them in terms of their breathing and that. So proactively, you deal with levels of anxiety. In most traditional environments, a student's got to go and knock on a door, go to an adult and go, I'm not feeling great, or I need help with it. Chance of that, highly unlikely. Tapping on your phone, natural extension to their palm nowadays.
I think it's clear to see that you have given it a lot of thought about what the needs are of your students. I mean, I think that's absolutely incredible. Just to the detail, to know what every kid is going through, what they're struggling with, and fostering an environment where you're there to help. It's not the teachers here in the hierarchy and the students here listen to the teacher. I think it seems like to me like you're building that balance of respect, but it's also a collaboration at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in terms of your esports arena, obviously that's very centralized in terms of technology. What inspired you to start that, and what is an esports arena for our viewers and listeners who might not know?
So when I was constructing the model of Centennial Schools, my instinct was to build a water polo pool because, of course, that was my passion for many years, and it made sense. But the reality is less than 30 to 40% of your students participate in school sport. So, and as they get higher up in towards matric, that number drops down considerably. So if you think most schools will have under 14 high schools, under 14 ABCD teams, by the time you get to matric, you've got a first and a second team in most sports. You've had this fall off. And so what I thought is, and most school budgets are largely around sports, which should be around academics, but it's actually not. It's around sport. So when I looked at it and I saw during lockdown what started happening, if you weren't a gamer, you became a gamer. All right. I ended up with an Xbox, and being a history teacher, I played Call of Duty, World War II, and we arrived on the Normandy shores in 1944 and ran up the beach, got into the trenches, and then had to navigate my way around the trenches. After 30 seconds, I was nauseous and I nearly puked. Okay, so that was my experience. Then I tried again, then I couldn't get it. And then eventually I got through it. And then I had a tank battle at one point, and the tank was turning and going through the streets and that. And then I got nauseous again, like, I can't do this. I had to get my nephew, and within seconds, boom, 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 and he was done, and we'd got to the next level. And then the more I read about it and kind of saw more and more students, more and more people were getting involved in gaming. So the lockdown created this mass of gaming. We also know that the students who are at school today are the most digitally literate generation on this planet. So naturally, gaming is to them what, for me, riding a bicycle was, or kicking a ball, or whatever it was. So taking gaming and then researching and putting it into education makes complete sense. So what we did is we built the largest esports arena that we know of. We don't know of a school yet that has it. In this 300 square meters, there's a 30 station computer lab, which is a gaming lab at least, with spec'd with the latest gaming computers from ASUS, ROG, Republic of Gaming computers, gaming chairs, where we designed the tables. We have a casting studio there for students to learn to shoutcast on the tournaments taking place. We have 6 sim races for Formula One, Assetto Corsa. Students actually learn to drive simulated driving. So we give them a Ford Fiesta. They all want a Ferrari or a Lambo, but they get a Ford Fiesta and they learn. And that simulator has gears, clutch, brake. Again, how do pilots learn? They don't get in a plane and start, they learn. So we actually start teaching them the fundamentals of driving. We have a FIFA lounge where for students who prefer gaming in terms of FIFA, more console based, and then an actual tournament sort of arena where the finals, semi-finals, quarterfinals are played 5v5, cast onto big 65, 75-inch TV screens. So all of that was designed to be the funkiest space for students to go into, and not just a typical computer classroom with computers and suddenly we've now got an esports. So we really wanted to make it as authentic as possible. Taking gaming and putting it then into the curriculum. So we have a subject called gaming studies. What does it teach? It teaches strategy, teaches creativity, teaches collaboration, teaches communication, okay? And you get rid of all the myths associated with gaming. So our students will go and they will do that. In that lab, that Esports Arena, we also bring in things like entrepreneurship. So students learn entrepreneurship, which is gamified, where they're running small businesses. Their outcome is different because of decisions that they make. We give them theory behind it. The grade 7s, for example, do the Adobe suite. So they are doing content creation, they are filming, they are producers, they are directors, they have to design elements of their posters that they have to market. The grade 9s do blockchain and crypto. The whole point is that you're giving them skills. You're taking the most authentic part of their lives, which is technology, and you're using it to give them a skill set second to none. We have some students that realize that you only wear 30% of your wardrobe. Think about it.
Yeah.
The other 70% you don't touch. Now take that 70%, give it in, clean it, repackage it, and sell it online. People will buy it.
Yeah.
So again, for me, Centennial Schools is not only about taking technology and esports and gaming, but it's this entire package that gives students a skill set so that when they leave school, they're actually qualified, other than a matric certificate, which only gets you into a university. Because there's no skill other than that.
Today's episode is sponsored by Centennial Schools in Sunninghill, a trailblazing educational institution that opened in January 2022. At Centennial Schools, the future is now. In response to an ever-changing world, every student from grade 6 to grade 12 is equipped with a laptop, integrating cutting-edge technology into a dynamic curriculum that includes cryptocurrency education, gaming, and entrepreneurship alongside traditional IB exams. But learning at Centennial Schools extends beyond academics. The school features unique facilities like the student lounges, the 100 Cafe, and a chill zone, designed to foster a community where students can collaborate and express themselves freely. The physical wellness program is equally innovative, with offerings like yoga, boxing, and mandatory bi-weekly personal training sessions in their state-of-the-art gym. Sports enthusiasts can thrive in indoor soccer, basketball, netball, and indoor hockey, or compete in Africa's largest school esports arena. With movable chairs in their learning hubs to adapt to various teaching styles and driving simulators for practical driving lessons, Centennial Schools ensures that students are not only prepared for the future, but are also active participants in shaping it. Learn more about how Centennial Schools is leading the way in modern education at www.centennialschools.co.za. And I think that's pretty cool in terms of the gaming, especially because gaming, when I was in school at least, which wasn't too long ago, it's been 8 years now. Yeah, time does go quickly. But gaming was always the kids that were gamers would wait until school's over. They couldn't wait till school was over so that they could go home and do gaming. And most likely it would be them chatting online with their friends. But perhaps they didn't get that collaborative environment. I mean, when I went to Centennial Schools to see the actual layout and the keypads and everything was unbelievable, just modern and exactly what you would want as a gamer. I mean, you've got commentators on the gaming space, which is very, very cool. And I think it's awesome that you've brought that into a curriculum so kids don't feel like school and their hobbies are two separate things. And at the same time, those kids who maybe are a bit more quiet and like to game at home, they now have a chance to collaborate and communicate with their friends at a venue which is much cooler than their laptop at home.
Yeah, there's a misperception still. There's a huge amount of education that still needs to go into gaming. And the misperception is Centennial Schools is just about gaming. It's one aspect. It's one aspect of who we are and what we do. What's so interesting is there was a conversation that I'd had with a specialist surgeon, and he operates with remote control. So he literally uses robotics in terms of his operation. Now, when we were having the discussion, for him, his point was, had he been to a school like Centennial Schools, where you have that ability, that coordination with your fingers and how your brain is registering to do certain activities, it would have put him in a completely different space. So it's when you look at that as a very simple example, that is the future. That's actually now. And you're not learning those skills at school. It's a simple example, but it's so relevant. It's not just about gaming. This is a specialist surgeon who's performing life-changing surgery.
Yeah.
That acknowledges it and sees the value of it.
And you also mentioned in your book, Fush, that being young, gay, and firmly in the closet was the loneliest place to be. Do you think the modern world has maybe become a bit more inclusive since the days when you were in school?
Yes and no. I think that we have we're at a difficult period now because we are being. Let me go back. In 2020, there was this whole movement of Black Lives Matter, and on the back of it came any form of discrimination. So from race to homophobia to people with disabilities to everything. And people lashed out. People lashed out to their schools. When I was at school, I was bullied. I was victimized because I was this, or I was body shamed, or whatever it is. And we're at a point now where there is so much confusion around diversity because you hear stories of a child who identifies as a wolf. So we now need to put a bowl down, or we need to do this and that, and we kind of don't know how to deal with it. Well, I wouldn't know how to deal with it. The simplicity of when I was growing up as a gay teen, that was the difficulty. Today, the confusion around inclusivity and diversity is massive. So, and my concern is that in terms of kind of your LGBT community, that there's going to be a backlash on this confusion around inclusivity and diversity. And a lot of work was done leading up to where you got to now, where I could comfortably where I got married. My relationship of 32 years is recognized, and I'm recognized as a human being. That's it. It's simple. I'm not trying to be anything else other than Fush and a human being. Okay. So the confusion around it, I think, is going to get worse. You're having leaders come into positions of power or authority who are giving really bad messages. And I am worried that we're going to go back into a more conservative approach where there was a huge amount of progress that had kind of been made, certainly in terms of acceptance and inclusivity. And I am concerned as to where we are at the moment. For me, I've always functioned just as who I am. You either like it or you don't. If you don't, I really don't care. I am who I am. I didn't choose to be like this. I didn't choose to be this person. I just was.
Yeah.
What are you, left or right-handed?
Right.
Well, why did you choose that?
I guess my brain chose that.
Well, my brain chose who I am. That's the simple point. I can try and be left-handed.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit awkward in my writing or signing or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's a skill I can learn, but I'm also just right-handed, and that's who I am. And when people get to understand that, it's the easiest thing to understand.
Yeah, and I think the world needs more understanding, for sure. I think everyone's different in their own way. And yeah, what do you think are ways that we can perhaps be more aware of when we aren't being accepting and understanding or inclusive to people around us? How can we work on that?
I think your society needs to be sophisticated. And when I say sophisticated, it comes from education. So the more educated you are, or the more you're exposed to education, the more you will question things, the more you will challenge things. I always said in history when I was teaching the French Revolution that when the peasants learn to read, the king is in trouble. So the more that you have that education, I think the better you can question things. On the back of that, you get to understand that people are different to you, and you're exposed to it because you're in a community or whatever it is. And being different doesn't mean it's bad. It's just people are different, and understanding difference, and the critical pillar around that for me is kindness. And it's an aspect that I really think have started to lose, is kindness, because we've become so concentrated on ourselves and what's good for me and what do I get out of this? And we've lost that aspect of kindness. And let's be clear, kindness does not mean weakness. There's a huge difference. But being kind to someone is a trait in human nature that I think we really need to push and promote more than anything else. In the school, that's what we talk about all the time, about kindness and inclusivity. And if we can get that right, we wouldn't be sitting in a world today where we have autocratic leaders who are steering us globally into an apocalypse. And that's the reality. There's, and that's what we're sitting with. So, yeah, I think kindness is a critical characteristic that we need to continue to enforce and be a part of.
And I've always seen you as a leader and a role model in my life. Do you think that empathy and kindness have something to do with being a good leader?
Yeah, some leaders don't, I think, have elements of kindness. And I suppose it's situational, where you're at and where you're leading. If you're leading in a military environment, you can't be kind to everyone. You have to make decisions and you have to kind of do it. But in a broader aspect, certainly in education, it's for me such a good trait to have within a leader. And I think all leaders should have elements of kindness. Absolutely.
And going back to the army, which you mentioned now, I think a lot of people were quite nervous when they were conscripted to the army. How did you actually embrace that challenge?
The same as an ice bath, you get on and do it. My difficulty when I was conscripted, I'd finished my studies. I chose to study first as opposed to go to the military. And conscription and then was apartheid South Africa. So only white males were conscripted into the army. And I finished my studies in 1989. So in 1990, I went into the army, and it was in February of the 2nd of February, where FW de Klerk announced the unbanning of the ANC. So that's right in my basic training as a conscript. And I remember clearly how the recruits or mates of mine who were in the same bungalow and platoon as me, the world was coming to an end for them. And for me, I'd chosen to rather do my military service. And when I was in a position of authority as an officer, that if I was in a situation that I could manage better than kind of not going into the military. So if it was a situation where at that time we were going to the border, or we were in the townships in terms of keeping the peace, and that we had to do as the military at that point in time, that I could actually manage it better than actually just be cruel and be kind of just harsh and not treat people with dignity and respect and that. And so for me, that was an important part of it. And also the historian in me had always had a military interest. Whether I was living in South Africa or United States or wherever I'd lived in the world, I would have always had that interest in the military. It was just something that I'd always been keen on.
Okay. And being in that military background, when you coached water polo, did you use any of those military tactics?
All the time. I mean, I remember when I started teaching, I'd come out of the army, and I think I mentioned it in the book. With my phys ed lessons, because I was a phys ed and a history teacher, I'd be waiting on the field, and heaven help you if you arrived 1 minute late or 1 second late to my lessons. You would do push-ups, you would run, you would do. So it was very militaristic in terms of my thinking, and I brought that element in the early days. And in my coaching, yes, to a large extent, how you coach, because you coach. If I say it now in 2024, it sounds quite harsh, but you don't coach to lose. You coach to win. I don't get into an ice bath and want to be at the bottom of your log. I'm going to be at the top of the log.
Yeah.
I'm going to win. Okay, so that's how you coach. You coach to win, and you're not going to coach to win by let's all talk about this. How do you feel? Are you okay? Do you want to do so many laps, or do you want to do? No, this is what you do. This is how you do it, and you drive it. And when you take that aspect and you put it into kind of everyday life, actually people want to be led, in a particular way. And I think sometimes we need to give more direction in how we lead. And for me, elements I learned in the military clearly came out in certainly in coaching and in sort of everyday leadership as well.
So what type of culture did you try instill in your sports teams that you were coaching for?
Discipline. Absolute discipline. Discipline is critical. That self-discipline, the ability to push yourself. You're never going to grow if you don't push yourself in anything. So that was important. And also sportsmanship. I absolutely detest watching bad sportsmen or dealing with people that are bad sportsmen. On the field, I always used to say to my players, on the field, take no prisoners. Within the constraints of the rules. Okay? Take no prisoners. Afterwards, you have dignity in victory and in loss. As hard as it is, we have to do that. And it just doesn't sit well with me when I see today how some sportsmen or sportswomen behave. It's just not on.
And how does that culture translate into a working education environment?
I think there are many aspects and characteristics of your sport that being a competitive sports person that you can bring into your life. And again, discipline is one of them, isn't it? When we had lockdown and everyone was working remotely, if you said to leadership teams within organizations, oh, your workers are going to work from home and they are going to be remote and not come in, and they're going to still be productive, they would have told you you're mad. Well, we found that during lockdown, most organizations were incredibly productive. And in fact, people went overboard where they worked longer and harder by working remotely. And I think that's a discipline that comes into it. So it's there's certainly aspects from sport that will go into your work environment.
And I think entrepreneurship these days is glorified in a sense that what you see on social media is that being an entrepreneur is the best way to live your life, but I think it's different for different people. And I think people want to start their own business or start their own venture, and they soon realize it wasn't as easy as they thought. What would you say is the greatest misconception that you've found since, I mean, you said you had an entrepreneur within yourself since you were a kid. What did you realize quite quickly when trying to become an entrepreneur?
I think I think most of these social media influencers are, I think a lot of what they put out is absolutely flawed. I think there's a misperception of how amazing it is. If you look at social media and you look at people's profiles, oh, that's amazing. That's so nice. Look where they're traveling. Look at
Yeah.
You have no concept of behind the scenes. You have no concept how authentic it is. Okay. So being an entrepreneur, you have to understand that failure is one of the characteristics of entrepreneurship. And show me one person. I mean, you listen to a guy like Elon Musk, who I have a complete respect for, but on the other hand, there's so many things I don't like about him, but that's okay. But you look at the number of times where Tesla almost failed, where Tesla right now is having to retrench 30% of their workforce because their sales have just literally plummeted. So failure is part of that. And social media doesn't teach you about failure. It just shows you very often the glamorous part of it. And there is no glamour. Starting something like Centennial Schools, people will just see the positive aspects, the good aspects of it, which I get. But behind the scenes, they don't know of the stress, the nausea, the sleepless nights, the worry, the headaches, for weeks of, am I going to get enough students? Will people buy into the concept? How's this going to work? As 2 students have left, this has happened. There's huge amount of pressures in that. I'm not going to put that on social media.
But sometimes someone has a very good idea and they find themselves in a situation where perhaps they're in a 9 to 5 that they don't quite enjoy anymore, and they're a bit hesitant to start and take that leap. What advice would you have for those types of people?
It's so difficult to. I always have this kind of thought of: are you born an entrepreneur or are you made as an entrepreneur? And so I don't have the answer yet. I think for me, it was in my DNA. Why? Because there are 4 of us in my family, 3 boys, one girl, and I'm the only entrepreneur. My father was an entrepreneur. So when I was a kid, I would go in my school holidays and I would spend time with him, and I'd watch how he interacted with customers. What did he do? How did he treat his employees? What was his thinking? Did he do marketing, etc.? And I loved that and I enjoyed that. So for me, it was so natural. But for some people, it's not. So they are not natural entrepreneurs because they don't want to take risks. And as an entrepreneur, you have to take risks. You have to. And if you're not built for risk because you're going to stress, you're going to be anxious about it, you're probably not an entrepreneur.
And for students who are naturally quite entrepreneurial, would you suggest that they still go to university after school, or?
I think things are going to change drastically going forward. So, what do we know? We know that 85% of the jobs that students will go into by 2030 do not exist right now. Do not exist. Okay. So, my question is, if I'm going to tertiary, what is that going to do for me that's going to prepare me for that work environment? That's the first thing. The second thing is, traditionally, we went into one job where we had one income stream and maybe a little bit of a side, and that's it. Students going forward, currently into work, are going to have 4 or 5 different streams. So think of a tributary of a river, and they're going to kind of flow their different income streams into their main source of earning. And so I don't believe that there is one degree that's going to do it. Most students today go, okay, let me think, what am I going to do? I'll just do a BCom marketing because that's great.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have a statistic, so I don't want to say 80% or 90%. But I would argue that the majority don't even use that. Because if I want to understand marketing, I will look at it on YouTube. I will research it. There's so much information I can get myself.
Yeah.
So my thinking is the way we approach leaving school. One, school needs to skill enough skills that you can start your own business. And I think what's going to happen is there are going to be a lot more short courses that will be way more effective than a 3-year degree that you've wasted. That's my view. Very controversial. Parents probably won't like it because you've got to have a degree.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a degree, you're not successful. I don't think that's going to be the future. I don't agree with it. I think there are ways that you can upskill yourself and have a skill set second to none that's preparing you for those 85% of the jobs that don't exist. And if you're going in the STEM subjects, your technology, your engineering, your science, granted, yes, the tertiary level is going to. I'm not going to become a doctor by looking at YouTube how to remove an appendix.
Yeah.
Okay. I need a skill that's a tertiary level. But how many of us are doctors? How many of us are engineers? You know? So I think we have to reimagine what we're doing at a tertiary level.
I think it was theory-based for a long time in the education sector. And I definitely found that, as you said, BCom marketing. I did a BCom business management for 3 years. That was my undergrad, and then I got an honors in marketing. And the following year, after getting my honors, I worked in a social media firm, and it was much more hectic than I'd imagined from what I'd learned in university, because I thought a lot of it was very theory heavy, and as soon as it became okay, now you're dealing with real life clients, now you got to adapt to that and actually doing the post, not just learning how it works, actually physically doing the social media post. Even that I'd never really learned before. So I think that the practical side is what you've really focused on at Centennial Schools by getting your outsourced people to come work with cryptocurrency, or that Canadian company that helps with entrepreneurship and they do a real life business. I mean, I think that's going to teach you skills far more than what any book is going to teach you.
I think tertiary education, yes, the cognitive stimulation is critical and is important, and the skill set behind writing an argumentative essay, although we're doing that in schools as well, and research is important. But I don't feel that you have to have a tertiary education to be successful, not going forward. I think there are much better ways that you can be qualified to be successful.
And being a CEO, an ex-head boy, an ex-principal, you obviously have to be a leader, and sometimes you might not feel like being a leader in certain situations, but on behalf of the group, you almost have to step up. Did you have any situations like that during your time as a principal or as a CEO?
Yeah, I think every day you're confronted with situations where you need to lead, you need to be the example, you need to calm things down, you need to give a direction. There are always those times, and they are really hard times. You know, when you in a school environment, when I was head of the school, there are times where you've had a death within the community. You've got to lead people. People are looking for direction. They're looking for comfort, and you've got to take your own grief and your own levels of anxiety, and you've got to manage that. Because and even down to sports teams, I remember when we were playing in finals at provincial level, and the team would come and we'd be down by 2 points or whatever in water polo, and we'd get together in a huddle, and they'd look, and boys would start panicking, and the players in the team. I said, stop. When I panic, then you panic. Until such time as you see me panicking, you carry on as normal. And for me as a leader, you need to give that, because people need that assurance. People are leaders in different fields, but some leaders are elevated into broader responsibility and with bigger picture than just a small kind of facet of leadership. And I think that's where you do need to step up and just calm, give direction, and yeah, lead by example.
And I can recall a time when I was in matric. Well, I was actually at grade 10 at the time, and one of my best friends passed away, which you know, as you as godfather at the time. And I think for you to stand up in front of a packed school and announce not only that as his godfather, but also we had another teacher die within that week. I think the way that you handled that must have been very, very difficult, and the way that you did handle it was very, very good. And that showed me that, you know, you could lead whenever we needed you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that was one of the most difficult periods of my life in terms of aspects of certainly leadership. And yeah, you kind of go into overdrive, and there's adrenaline, and you have a community that you've got to lead, and you've got to let them know it's going to be okay. And as difficult as the time is, it will be okay. It will be, you will get through it, and we will survive it. It's not going to be easy, but you reassure people that things will be okay. And again, I think that's a strong characteristic of leadership.
And in closing, I'd love to carry on chatting, but what is a pivotal decision that you've made in your life that led you to where you are now?
I don't think that there's one decision. I think there are so many things that we do on a daily basis that we are aware of and that we're not aware of that end up determining where we are. There are just so many. So I wouldn't want to give you one particular aspect. I think it's such a broad, there are so many experiences and moments that have led me to kind of get to this point. Did I ever expect to be here? Probably not. When you're growing up, you think you're going to do this or you're going to do that. I've enjoyed listening to the earlier podcasts you've done, because you've had a lot of younger guests than me. You kind of say, when you are, it's like what my dad said when I turned 40. He said, when you're 40, you think you know everything. And when you turn 80, you realize you knew nothing. And I think that's the reflection of maybe when I'm 80, I look back and say, okay, the pivotal moment was this. But right now, I'm hoping there's a little bit of wisdom that says there's so many experiences that have led to getting to this point.
Well, thank you for today and joining me on this podcast. You reached out to me, which was really awesome, and I think it's been really cool after 8 years of school for us to reconnect. And on this stage, it's even better. This is definitely something that I'll remember for the rest of my life. I don't think there have been many podcasts where a student is chatting so openly with his ex principal. So yeah, I mean, it's a dream come true for me, and I'm really, really enjoying the podcasting process. And I think what you're doing with Centennial Schools is absolutely incredible, shaping the future of education. And thanks again for the sponsorship of this episode. I've really enjoyed just the experience of going to Centennial Schools and seeing it for myself. And yeah, today was absolutely awesome. So thank you, Fush.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks to the crew. And I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Cool.